Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come and to contribute to this interesting workshop. And I will have my little introduction or contribution about challenges and opportunities in diplomacy in the Arctic. So we all know that the platform for the Arctic diplomacy is indeed the Arctic Council. It's not a legally binding organization, it's an intergovernmental forum on issues of sustainable development and environmental protection, exactly the topics what we are discussing here today. One can say that Arctic Council is a success story of information production for over 20 years, or actually 25 years when everything started from Arctic Environmental Protection Strategy, and when everything started from scratch. And now I would say that all the information and knowledge about the Arctic is totally on different level than what it was in the beginning of 90s. Arctic Council has produced huge amount of reports that are compilations of existing information about the Arctic. It's not running research as an organization as such, but putting together the topical research information in circumpolar level. Even if Arctic Council have been criticized quite much that it's not legally binding and what is it doing, it has been proved by many studies that it has really been influential. It acts as an Arctic voice in global fora. It has affected on national politics. You can easily read the same phraseology and topics in national strategy documents and research funding programs in Arctic states and non-Arctic states. It has been vital in global treaties for pollutants like POPs and mercury. It has launched Arctic treaties. You all know these three treaties regarding oil and marine issues. And then there is a negotiation going on and getting into completion under the IMO, International Maritime Organization Polar Code. There is a negotiation about Arctic research agreement, and then other agreements that are ongoing right now, and all these are launched by this operation of the Arctic Council. Influence of the Arctic Council agenda is matter of diplomacy, but it has frameworks, of course. Arctic Council have its rules of procedures, and based on them, the proposals can be made by Arctic states and permanent participants for the agenda of the Arctic Council. So they can make the proposals what are discussed in the international Arctic level. But it's not only that. The structure of the Arctic Council is influencing. The work of the Arctic Council is actually done in working groups and task forces, and they have an opportunity and possibility to propose activities, and that is the channel to influence on the agenda of the Arctic Council. Of course, general policy interest influences on the agenda. 10 years ago, the Arctic was not that hot topic than it is today, so one can notice it pretty easily that there is a major change in the discussions in this Arctic Council world. But then there are informal channels that I find one of the most important ones. The Arctic Council have operated already 2 decades, quite long, a little bit aside from the focus of global discussions, and it has managed to grow an epistemic community, a community that has shared understanding what is going in the Arctic, and they are there is quite limited number of experts and actors that participate into this Arctic Council work, and they guide the agenda discussion quite a lot. And then this is advanced by individuals who are knowledge brokers and who talk for the Arctic Council. One of the most known knowledge broker we have here, Bob Gorel, who has talked a lot for Arctic climate impact assessment. So Arctic Council structure allows iterative and learning process about the substances. Arctic Council assessments and documents and strategies are done by experts and scientists. They influence on political decisions, which influence further on strategy documents and politics by the Arctic countries and Arctic Council working groups that influence back to this work of the scientists. So this is clearly a loop of learning process that Arctic Council has developed for itself. This is the structure of the Arctic Council. There are 5 environmental working groups that are permanent programs, and then all the other sectoral issues are under Sustainable Development Working Group that runs ad hoc projects. The work, as I said, is done by expert scientists and indigenous peoples in these groups. They influence and talk together with diplomats who bridge the information to policy leaders and which affect back to the work of the experts. Then Arctic Council's chair country has a special influence on the agenda. There is a 2 years program, 2 years term for chairing the Arctic Council, and many times there are special policy interest and special arrangements and even resources to run the agenda and change the agenda or change the direction of the Arctic Council work. The problem here is that because of this 2 years term, how can we ensure the continuity for strategic thinking of the Arctic Council? And that requires diplomacy and cooperation by the following chair countries. Arctic Council does not have a common budget, so available resources influence on what is going on there, and then only projects that have resources are accepted on the agenda. And the resources are dependent on national funding of projects, and sometimes they are supported by other activities like Nordic Council of Ministers of EU. So one can say a little bit that the money talks also on the agenda for the agenda of the Arctic Council. Indigenous peoples have unique position as permanent participants in the Arctic Council, and they, as I said, have a right to propose activities. The challenge in this structure is this can be seen as this increasing global interest towards the Arctic should not overshadow indigenous peoples' unique position. Non-Arctic states and organizations that are observers in the Arctic Council, in general, Arctic Council has inclusive policy to accept observers, and that increases Arctic Council influence. But then the problem is that there is no systematic structure how observers can participate to discussions. This is really a topical matter right now, because observers are always not happy about the possibilities to influence on the agenda. The Arctic Council has no structure for local level officers. That clearly reduces its influence in local level, and I would say that this is a problem. However, there is a new project, AAKA, Adaptation Action for Changing Arctic. That's going to be a big major report by the Arctic Council in near future, and that has a strong stakeholder participation component, and that may create new connections to local officers and increase the influence on local level. Arctic Economic Council was established recently. This has a potential to increase Arctic Council's influence on local level, but the question is there true interest by business and industries to participate? Now, finally, scientists and experts are working in these working groups that are dependent on active input of researchers, and non-Arctic researchers can participate to the work. So I would say that Arctic Council offers a clear structure or platform for science diplomacy. But because of this process is so clear and obvious, diplomats and scientists are working so closely together, one must pay attention that science and politics must not be blurred with each other in the Arctic Council. There is increasing need for research in the Arctic. Arctic states have launched new research programs. Also, non-Arctic actors are investing to Arctic research. There is this agreement that is coming, and important here is that this new agreement has to be open for participation by non-Arctic states in order it not to be counterproductive and not helpful for researchers. And as said, researchers are important source for the Arctic Council operation in general. So as conclusion, Arctic Council's influence depends on engaging and inclusive operation. And I would say that Arctic Council should not be developed as a legally binding organization, as it would narrow down its agenda, limit participation, decrease reactivity and flexibility, and reduce this way Arctic Council's influence. I would say that it would reduce possibilities for diplomacy and science diplomacy, and thus influence as well. In this current economic and geopolitical situation, environmental and environment-related societal issues most likely remain high on the agenda of the Arctic Council, so the role of research and science diplomacy will stay strong. There is an opportunity or to even greater enhancement of knowledge in the Arctic Council, and I would say that Arctic Council could offer a model for diplomacy and informed decision making globally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paula.